Welcome to Two Souls Podcast, a podcast to shift, impact, empower, and disrupt your consciousness, ultimately allowing you to thrive in this human experience. Now, here are your hosts, Amber Megenhauser and Angela Blaha. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Hi, Amber. How are you?
I am fantastic. How about you?
Great. What do we get to explore today?
I was wondering, what is a soul crisis and how do we get through it?
A soul crisis, which is kind of where we are in society today, right? Like we don't have
Yeah.
a whole lot of. So, a soul crisis is when we don't have awareness of the depths of the soul. And the soul can split itself, that's the whole purpose of the multidimensional realities and being a multidimensional person. Um, the soul can literally split its energy, or it's not like it separates from its energy. It just splits its energy, has a thread to the other dimensions or the other lives that it's experiencing. Um, but what happens with us when it becomes a crisis is that it splits so much that it literally can't bring itself together. It can't bring the information that it's receiving, let's say, on in another existence or even in another human body. Like we can split into several humans at one time. Um, so, but in reality, we have the ability to pull that information into this existence, into this awareness. When it becomes a crisis is when we've separated ourselves so much that we actually don't have an awareness that we can pull it back together.
So is it separation from things that have happened within this lifetime and just like giving your energy away? Or is it things from previously?
Yeah, it could be past lives. It could be this lifetime. If you've had extreme trauma, like you'll shard a piece of yourself off so that you don't have memory of that trauma. Um, and, soul energy goes with that shard. Like when we separate from that, it could becomes like a splinter of glass, like a shard of glass. And that can just stay in a time stamp within your energy system. So it could be, past lives, it could be future lives, it could be alien, off this planet kind of an existence. So there's not really it's this, that, or the other thing. It can be a multitude of things. If we look at the concept of multidimensionality and the multiverse, that literally means that you know and understand that or you feel like there's a deep knowing and a deep feeling that there is a part of you someplace else. You may not know where that is, or you don't have conscious awareness about how to access that, but I can guarantee that you're feeding yourself information. Like that's where giant, brilliant ideas come from, is when you're streaming that information back and forth from this consciousness to another consciousness. So, yeah, soul pieces, soul shards, like, in the shamanic world, we do soul retrievals to bring back those pieces, like from trauma in the past, in your past lives or other lifetimes. We bring back those soul pieces so that you can sort of get a better handle about who you are and why you're here.
So how does a person bring back those pieces?
I'm sorry?
How does a person bring back those pieces?
So in shamanism, we can do a ritual to bring back those pieces where the shaman literally travels. to either the underworld, the middle world, or the upper world to bring back those pieces. Now, those aspects of you or those pieces of you don't have to come into this reality. So it's literally you can bring them back, but they don't have to stay. You can recognize them, but they don't have to stay. The where it gets a little bit tricky is if those pieces, like let's say you've had extreme trauma in 4 or 5 lifetimes ago, and let's say it was a rape. All right, so let's like use a sort of a reality kind of thing here. So let's say you were raped in 4 lifetimes ago, and your soul literally separated itself so that it would not have to acknowledge or memorize or the events of that rape. So it separated itself and it put that energy in that timestamp. Now the shaman can go back, retrieve that soul and bring it forward, and you just literally bring it forward with consciousness. You ask permission, we do all those things, and then we bring it back with consciousness. And then that between you, your consciousness, which resides right here in this moment, and that soul piece get to decide how much of that soul is staying, if there's memory that's going to come with it, if there's emotion that's going to come with it, or if it just goes back to that timestamp. So, and keep in mind that when we do bring back soul pieces, like from trauma, there are generally emotions that come and there are generally memories that come. We can naturally do that, if you're like let's say you go on a trip or you do some type of healing. You can have these weird, crazy memories or visions or whatever, however they come in, or just knowings, right? You can have those kinds of things, and it can be like you can bring back those pieces or those shards or those soul components, those aspects, and have it just be instantaneously done. Or you can bring it back and have it be like, not that it becomes your experience this lifetime, but you may have a similar experience that you've had this lifetime that now needs to be healed, and you need to bring back that, or you need to bring in that soul piece so that it can be completely healed. Does that make sense?
Yes. As you're talking about this, I had a lot come in about when we went to Louisiana, and I had that was one of my very first experiences with seeing and knowing different lifetimes of my past. And when we had went to that plantation that day, there was so much stuff that had come in, and I actually lived 3 different lifetimes on that plantation. And I had so many visions while we were there about what I had did and what had happened. And when we had left that day, like even my shoulder had hurt. Like I didn't know what I had done until we had kind of talked through it. And I realized that it was like all of these things that had happened. So with like remembering that and bringing it back to you, does it make you feel more whole in this lifetime, and you're just like that much more powerful within yourself as your own person, not necessarily having the remembering, but just bringing that piece back that you had lost of your own soul?
Well, in theory, we would think that that would be the case, right? So let's take your
Mm-hmm.
example, in Louisiana and being in that plantation and having that shoulder issue. Like if you were
Mm-hmm.
unconscious, right, about bringing back that memory, and you didn't have people to sort of help you work through that, what would you think would be wrong with you?
I didn't I didn't know actually until I had asked, because I was like, gosh, I just feel like somebody's been jerking me around, which was actually exactly what had happened. So I would have brushed off the pain just like, oh, I have a cramp in my shoulder or something like tight, like I totally was going to like not even acknowledge what it was until we
Hmm.
walked through it.
Right. And
So
then,
the mind just couldn't go ahead.
then you would have, like, it would have just stayed painful, right? Like the shoulder, like those kinds of things don't go away generally unless you do work through it. And so you would have ended up, saying, "Oh man, I must have hurt my shoulder," and then would have went to a doctor and had shoulder surgery, and all these kinds of crazy things that we do,
Mhm.
right? And don't have any consciousness about it. So yeah, but how did you feel? Like, do you feel like you became a little more solid, or does it feel like, yeah, it was just an experience and I don't really have any, I don't feel anything other than that experience? Or
I feel like there was different parts of it where the shoulder thing I felt like that was completely an experience, but one thing I've really learned about myself is I need to feel the physical. And so it is just like slap me in the face like really big sometimes, so it's like, "Oh, I get it." Where it really brought my awareness to it, where the shoulder thing was totally a completely an experience, but there was a point too where we were all standing around this great big huge humongous tree, and this tree was not like any tree I had ever seen. And there was this like house there, it was like their hospital or whatever, and it's all these like crazy visions were coming in about everything I had done, like as a different person. I was like a doctor in this hospital, and I was also a patient in a different lifetime. And so I had all this stuff coming in where with that part of it, there was the emotion, there was the remembering, there was everything. Where with the shoulder, it's like knew somebody I like had jerked me, but it was like just the experience, and I feel like my awareness just brought it to me, so that way I was aware of what was happening, because I do need that physical part of it.
mm. So thinking back, can you recognize that there was a piece of you that returned or not?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I
Hmm.
do feel like that something came back to me, and I did feel more whole after I left there. And I remember it being like very emotional at one point in time. I actually wanted to cry because I was just like, I'm actually doing this. Like it is really happening, because that was the first steps of kind of where I've like physically seen, I physically knew. I something that was the start of like my whole journey just made sense after that.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, so sometimes that's all we need, right? For the, like, it's the sense of, I've accomplished something here. We may not be able to physically see it, but we know deep within us that, oh yeah, this is why I'm here, right? This is why I came on this experience. This is why I'm around these people. This is why I'm having this epiphany right now, right? Like, this is why I'm having this memory and these emotions. And there's a sense, like some kind of a sense that happens when we bring back soul pieces or soul shards. Like, we can just be out working in the garden or just out and walk in nature, and all of a sudden you sense something, like you feel like there's something going on with you. We may not be able to put a conceptualization or a meaning to it, but we can experience it. And I feel like when we do these soul retrievals and bringing back these soul shards and working through these crises that we have, these soul crises, like I feel like that is like we know it. Like we know we're headed for something in a soul level. And maybe the physical body could feel it and maybe it can't. Maybe the emotions become aroused and maybe they don't. Maybe there's some memory that comes in and maybe not. But we know deep inside, like there's this sixth sense that we get about something's going on here at a soul level. And when we go through these soul crises,
Yeah.
like we've been working on becoming very soul filled, bringing the conscious awareness to the soul versus the human, because we know that this is just a vessel to carry the soul through, right? And so when we're working on these kinds
Yeah.
of things, like we don't experience the crisis that the mass consciousness is experiencing right now.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah. And that's really where we are. When we work through evolutionary kinds of periods of, embodying more of the soul or becoming aware of the soul more that we are, energy, frequencies, vibrations versus a physicalness, or bringing those two concepts together, like that quantum kind of energy into matter. There's an evolution that happens in your understanding of how the world works or how the soul works. And bringing those two components together is really what the crisis becomes, because the soul can hang out for so long outside of the body or in your field. And pretty soon, sooner or later, it will be like, okay, we got to come together here, because this human ego, which is the materialistic portion of it, is like way off balance here, and that's where we are in the consciousness. And so, yeah, the entire human consciousness is experiencing a soul crisis right now. And how do we work through that? Well, we begin to acknowledge that it exists and that we are more than just a physical human being.
So having people recognize their soul self versus just their physical human being will help people understand the soul crises and that they are going through and the soul shards they need to pull into themselves to feel whole.
Yeah, because, well, that's the first steps. There's that awareness. That's what we hear people talk about the Great Awakening and all of that kind of thing. Well, that's really what's happening is there's an awareness component that says, oh, maybe I'm something more, right? Maybe I'm not just this physical matter. Maybe I'm not just this, um, blob of intestines and a heart and, all these skin and all this kind of stuff. Maybe there is something more here. And there's a recognition, there's a recognition of, um, not that not that you want to bring religion into this, because that's totally a different concept or idea, but we're not necessarily, well, we can bring those ideas. I think that's where the gate opens, is into the ideas of religion, like a soul and God and um, hell and purgatory, all of those kinds of things exist in that format, in that platform, the religious platform. So we can bring those concepts and ideas into the awareness, but it doesn't really explain the experiences that we have when we're working on our soul self, becoming more soul filled versus, being separate.
Yeah.
The crisis happens when we've separated ourselves so much from the soul experience. Like the human and the soul right now are like the farthest away in duality that it could possibly get. And literally, we are walking zombies. I mean, we are the walking dead, literally. Um, the
Yeah.
crisis becomes a reality because we have split so far. And now we're having these awakenings or this awareness of, wait, there's something not quite right here. I've split myself so much that, gee, can I pull myself together? And so, we have what we're experiencing now is these extreme fears because, the bigger the global knowledge, like, they want us to be zombies. They want humanity to be zombies, split us so much that we become very robotic in our energies and we'll do whatever they want us to do. So there's not just, there is control and domination in a world of duality. That's, a given. And we've split ourselves energetically, we've split ourselves so much that control and domination is in control here. Right. And now we're having an awakening saying, oh, wait, maybe this
Yeah.
control thing isn't really what I came here for. Maybe this really isn't the game that I want to be playing in right now. Maybe I need to have an awakening. And we do
Do
that
you
either on a
think when
conscious, go ahead.
do you think that when people do go through the awakening, it's like you kind of go through a traumatic event that makes you understand that you almost have get like this yearning afterwards that you are meant for so much more. And I feel that's kind of like what is going on now too, where people can relate to what is going on today to different traumatic events that had happened to them in previous lifetimes. And it is actually creating more of an awakening just because people are like, no, like we are meant for more than this. And
Yes.
I'm
So,
just saying that because I feel like that's, go ahead.
yeah, well, that's how humans work, right? Like we have these conceptual ideas that we can't go it alone, that we have to bring everybody with us, and that we can only awaken if the mass consciousness awakens. We have these weird concepts. We have these weird ideas, and none of which are true. By the way, we have to awaken individually. We can't be a unit if we're split. The only way we can be a unit and come together is if we are whole. Like I have to become whole before I can join the whole. Right? So I have
Yeah.
to become solid in who I am and why I'm here before I can actually contribute to the mass consciousness. It's just backwards the way that we think about it. It's backwards. So you have to work on yourself first,
Yeah.
right? It's just so weird. So we have to
Yeah,
work
for
on
sure.
ourselves first. We have to bring back these soul components, these soul pieces, these soul shards, stop being in a soul crisis ourselves. Then we start to see the world very, very differently. We start to have very, very different
Yeah.
ideas. And yes, some of us need a shocking event. The mass consciousness, it needs a shocking event to bring the pieces back because they don't really want to work on themselves. It's hard. It's hard work to work on yourself. I'm not going to lie. It's extremely hard work. And we have a mass
It is.
consciousness
It definitely
that,
is.
yeah, we have a mass consciousness that's so separate from itself. And it's like, where do I even begin? It's overwhelming to me. I don't even know how.
Yeah.
Right. And so then they need a shocking event, which literally causes more trauma, but that's a whole different topic. But we need a shocking event in order for the awakening to literally bust open and happen. And we're kind of experiencing that now.
Yeah.
Which, if we would just sit back and say, okay, well, I feel like something needs to change here. I don't really want to be in this robotic zombie-ish kind of state any longer, but I don't really know. That's the problem, is we don't have the ability to have critical thinking skills to ask ourselves questions about, gee, do I just want to get up, go to work, come home, eat, drink, poop, and then do it all over again, right? Like we don't
Yeah.
have these we're not taught critical thinking skills right now because we don't have the ability to pull ourselves together to critically think.
So how would somebody recognize, I mean, in a way everybody's going through a soul crisis on some type of level,
Right.
is how would they recognize how they can help themselves?
Well, first thing you have to be willing to recognize, right? Like we pretend that we
Yeah.
have free will and we're sovereign, and we pretend that, but we don't live in a world that has free will. We don't live in a world that allows for sovereignness for you to choose over your mind, body, emotions, soul. We don't live in that kind of a world right now. And so there first has to be a recognition or a willingness to see things differently. There needs to be a willingness to say, okay, well, this doesn't feel right, but I don't know what else exists, right? So there has to be that willingness first. Then what happens is once you open up to your own willingness, like people start coming into your life, right? Like there's a mass. It's like the gateway opened and we let all the cows out at once. And people just start coming into your life and you're like, whoa, what's happening here? And then that portion of this awakening process moves very rapidly. Like you just become a crazy person and you want to grab all kinds of information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you were talking about that, I just had like everything that happened, like in my stage of going through that. I'm like, oh, that's what that was. It's
Yeah.
actually a really super awesome, cool feeling. And it's like nothing you can explain. And once you actually make that choice to want to know all the other stuff and become your whole soul self,
Mm-hmm.
it is a feeling like no other. And you change so much and you don't even realize it. It's just, you're so, it doesn't matter like what you have going on like in your life. Like you're so completely blissful, happy with who you are, where you're going, where you're headed. And it's like you feel whole again.
Yeah. The hard part is that willingness to say, okay, well, I want to be open to something different. That decision right there is the hardest decision we can make as human beings. Then you're on a really quick
Yeah.
and rapid growth experience. But that initial decision of I I want I want to do something different. I coming out of that zombie stage, well, making the decision inside the zombie stage is critical. And I feel like right now in the trajectory of humanity, that coming out of that zombie stage, like we're not there yet. We're not coming out of that zombie stage yet, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
which is why we have to have all these catastrophes, right? Like we have to have more catastrophic kinds of things happen because to jerk yourself out of that zombie-ish kind of robotic energy is like we don't unless we've been doing this for a while, like we don't have that ability to like pull yourself out, right? Like there's just something. So like you and I have been working on this for quite some time. Well, me in particular, it's been a lifelong issue. And so it's been, small steps, baby steps almost, one thing after another, after another, after another. But to jerk yourself out of that zombie kind of energy field is traumatic on the body, it's traumatic on the mind, it's traumatic on the emotions. And so none of us, we can feel that. I mean, I'm pretty dang sure the mass consciousness can feel that, but we resist it because it's like, oh God, I don't really want to do that. Right? Oh, I don't really want to have to work on myself. I don't really want to have that experience. So we're in this huge experience of resistance right now. And it's detrimental. Resistance is the most detrimental thing we can do as a human being.
Why do you think people don't want to work on themselves? Just because it's the unknown?
Yeah, it's totally unknown. Right? Like, we're comfortable being just in our patterns. We're comfortable just being in our behaviors. Even if they're really terrible behaviors, we're still comfortable in them. Right? But change means that we cannot foresee the future, which is a lie. We can foresee the future if we just open up to that. Then we'd have a direct path, like we have all these fears built up in us. And they're all just lies. They're all just lies. We can foresee the future. We can open ourselves up to our greatest potentials. Like, we don't have fear about losing or failure because we've done it over and over and over and over, right? Like, we don't really have fears of that. We have more fear about living our most amazing life and seeing and understanding all the potentials, because then we have to make decisions.
Yep.
Yeah, we have more fear about that. And that's what the resistance is. It's like, oh, if I crack myself open, then I'm going to have too many options. How will I ever be able to decide? Because we don't have the critical thinking skills to say, well, this is right for me. This isn't right for me. Instead, we falter back into judgment, where we're always judging outside of ourselves versus going inward and saying, yeah, this is not what I came here to do. Take a deep breath. Let that one sink in.
I know. I'm kind of just sitting here mind blown.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we are as a crisis, as a soul crisis. And then when it becomes so uncomfortable, when the resistance becomes so uncomfortable, it's like that theory of hitting rock bottom, then is when we open the door. But until that
That's
happens,
exactly what happened.
Yeah,
to me.
exactly. Yeah.
I completely hit rock bottom and had a lot of traumatic things happen. And it's that's when I made the decision. No, I'm meant for more. And my whole world changed.
Yes, exactly. See, that's instantaneous healing. We talk about, being able to heal ourselves instantly. Well, it's all based in decisions. Instantaneous healing happens when we actually make a decision. Yeah, can you feel the power of that? Like, that's a super powerful energy right there. Yeah. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
And we all go through soul crisis, so
yes,
we all get it on some type of level.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the first thing to do is be willing to be open.
Open to receiving everything that's coming to you.
Mm-hmm. And, make a decision. Make a damn decision.
It's the decision. That's the key word in almost everything that you teach is rule number 1. You need to make some type of a decision. Yep.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be giant decisions, right? Like, just make small decisions so that the trauma or the opening isn't so dramatic, right? So maybe we just make a decision to watch a TV show that's totally out of our norm. That could be the first step of cracking the door open. Maybe we go out on a nature walk and we literally touch a tree. right? Like that could be totally out of our norm. We don't want to do things that are going to cause more trauma. Well, you can if that's how you work as a human being. If we have these big, gigantic experiences and that's how you like, that's your preference, then do it. If that's not your preference, we don't have to, change comes anytime that we make a decision. And so make small decisions. They don't have to be giant. Read a book that's totally out of your comfort zone. Talk to someone. Be listening. Practice listening skills. Like for a good portion of humanity, we do not listen. Watch people's
Yeah.
body language. Like if that's a super uncomfortable thing, be in silence, right? Go and meditate. Just be in silence and do absolutely nothing for 10 minutes a day. Those are just, small
Yeah.
steps that can literally push the door open for you. It doesn't have to be trauma. We're rehearsed in trauma, though. As a human society, as a
Yeah.
human race, we have an addiction to trauma.
Yeah. And why? Because we all bring all of our previous traumatic events forward with us, and we hold on to them instead of releasing and letting it go and just understanding the experience. Because I actually used to do that. I brought my trauma forward with me instead of realizing the trauma that I actually went through was an experience for me to have to be able to be who I am.
Right. Well, the trauma becomes the pattern, right? And it doesn't matter what the pattern is. We are comfortable in the pattern. It does not matter. We don't want to change. We don't want to have to do the hard work. We don't want to have to make those decisions to change. And so, yes, we bring it over and over and over and over. And then once it becomes a pattern, you have to visualize a loop. Like once we have a pattern, it becomes a loop and it just repeats, 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 repeats. It never literally goes away unless we make a decision to get out of that loop, create a new one, or, better yet, just be in expansion. But we don't feel safe in jumping out of the loop because we think we can't see the future, or we don't really know how. Like sometimes the patterns become so comfortable that it's overwhelming to make a decision and to step outside of that. Right? So we just stay in the comfort
Yeah.
of the pattern, whether it's harmful to us or
Yep.
not. That's besides the point. We just can't see any further than the pattern. And so it's like, jumping off of a, 100-foot, I don't know, level building and saying, oh, well, I'm just going to jump here. I don't know where I'm going to land, or I don't know if I can fly. I don't know, we're just going to jump. I mean, that's really the panic that the nervous system feels when we try to move out of a system or out of a pattern. And that's where we are as a mass consciousness. Like we don't know where to jump right now, right? Like we know that the systems need to be broken down,
Yeah.
that they aren't really serving us in a progressive kind of way. We know that those things need to be broken down, but we have a lot of panic and a lot of fear about what's being created, because or how to create something new. So we have a lot of resistance in the world, even though we know, every single one of us know that this really isn't helping us. We still are in this resistance, and it's safer to be in the resistance than it is to jump and not know where to go.
Yeah.
And that's what creates a
Which creates,
crisis.
yep, I
Yep.
was just going to say that. That is what
Yeah.
creates a crisis.
Yeah. And that's where we're at. So we experience soul crisis on an individual basis, and we're actually experiencing soul crisis on a mass consciousness basis. So we're
So there's
resisting
multiple
both.
different levels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well,
we
this
would
was
like to
really
thank
fun.
all of our listeners. Yes, this was way fun. It's such a, with what is going on in society today, this is exactly what everybody needs to deal with in their life to be stable in themselves. If anybody has any questions about the soul crisis, reach out to Angela or I. Angela, do you still teach the soul crisis class?
I haven't taught that for a while, but that might be something to, reactivate.
I think it just helps everybody understand where they're at on their own personal level, and that every single person out there has some type of soul crisis that they're going through. And it just helps you break down those walls to be able to be stable within yourself. So if anybody does have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to Angela and I. We would love to help. If you have any questions about anything else or would like us to talk about a certain subject, please feel free to reach out. Until next time, from our soul to yours, have a super fantastic day.